Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the constant pressure of negative thoughts? Have you ever experienced that moment when everything seems dark and peace feels distant? These thoughts can trap you, consume your mind, and make you feel alone, with no way out. But what if I told you there is a way to break this cycle and find true peace? A peace that comes from a deep understanding of Jesus' teachings. No matter how difficult your thoughts may be, there is hope. Let's explore together how to eliminate those negative thoughts and achieve the peace that only God can offer. First, we need to understand that negative thoughts are not something to be ignored or disregarded. Jesus teaches us that our minds are powerful and what we think impacts who we are and how we live. In Matthew 6:25-34, Jesus calls us not to worry about the future, as it only increases our suffering. He says, "Do not worry. Look at the lilies of the field and see how God cares for them. If He cares for the flowers, how much more will He care for you?" This passage reminds us that when we allow ourselves to be anxious about the future, we are, in fact, letting our negative thoughts take control. When we cling to negative thoughts, they create a vicious cycle of anxiety, fear, and doubt. Jesus offers us an alternative: to trust in God and surrender our burdens to Him. The Bible teaches us that the mind is a battleground. In Philippians 4:6-7, Paul urges us to not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. When we do this, He promises to give us a peace that transcends all understanding. The human mind is naturally inclined to worry, but Jesus calls us to place our trust in God. This doesn't mean ignoring our problems, but choosing not to let them dominate us. One of the most powerful ways to combat negative thoughts is to replace lies with the truth of God. In Romans 12:2, Paul writes, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Jesus teaches us to think differently. He tells us to focus on things that are true, pure, and praiseworthy. When we renew our minds with God's truth, we begin to see the world from a new perspective. The promises of Jesus about peace, love, and protection can be the key to clearing our negative thoughts and restoring serenity. One of the greatest blocks to mental peace is bitterness. Jesus teaches us that we must forgive to be forgiven. Matthew 6:14-15. Forgiveness is not easy, especially when we feel hurt, but it has the power to release our minds and hearts. When we forgive, we're not only freeing the other person, we're freeing ourselves from a burden that keeps us from living in peace. Forgiveness is an act of courage and faith, for it allows us to rest in God's grace. Prayer is one of the greatest gifts we have to overcome negative thoughts. When we feel overwhelmed, tormented by worries and anxieties, it's easy to lose control of our thoughts. But prayer is the bridge that connects us directly with God, a way to open our hearts and seek refuge in His peace. Jesus invited us to pray in Matthew 11:28-30. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." When we surrender in prayer, we find rest not only for our bodies, but especially for our minds and hearts. Instead of being consumed by the whirlwind of negative thoughts, we find a peace that surpasses human understanding. Prayer allows us to align our minds with God's will, reminding us of His promises and renewing us in His truth. No matter how tired or discouraged we are, He promises that in His presence we will find deep and true rest. Now you understand that the key to overcoming negative thoughts is not in trying to control them on your own, but in surrendering each one to God. As Jesus said in John 14:27, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives." This peace is real, deep, and transformative. No matter how heavy your thoughts may be, you can find rest in Jesus. He is always there, ready to give you the peace that transcends all understanding. So, start today. Surrender your worries to God and experience the true peace that comes from trusting in Him. Jesus invited us to pray in Matthew 11:28-30, where He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." These words of Jesus are a direct invitation to lay aside the burdens that weigh us down. He knows the weight we feel in our minds and hearts. He understands our struggles and calls us to rest in Him. Prayer in this sense is a surrender of all our burdens, an opportunity to stop and for a moment set aside all the concerns that try to dominate our minds. When we pray, we stop fighting alone and give our battles to God, trusting that He is taking care of everything. When we surrender in prayer, we find rest not only for our bodies but especially for our minds and hearts. Instead of being consumed by the whirlwind of negative thoughts, we find a peace that surpasses human understanding. Prayer allows us to align our minds with God's will, reminding us of His promises and renewing us in His truth. No matter how tired or discouraged we are, He promises that in His presence we will find deep and true rest. Every moment of prayer is an opportunity for us to remember that we are not alone in our struggles. As we pray, we surrender completely to God's care, and through this act of faith, we allow Him to remove the chains of anxiety and worry that imprison us. Jesus invites us to trade the heavy burden of our anxieties for the relief of His peace. When we surrender to Him, He gives us not just physical rest, but rest for our souls, something the world can never offer.